Hold on, guys, just 1 second. Hey,
Sorry to bother.
no worries.
Is this number 11?
How did he get there?
That's
Hey,
pretty
So
wacky.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I got over there.
that's crazy. And see, that's why we should have had intrusion detection set up. No, I'm just kidding.
That's more of an access control
I
use
had
case.
an alert.
Yeah,
I
no,
had an
seriously,
alert.
that's like a. Yeah. Hey everyone, I'm Ben with SCW. Welcome back to our discussion series in the Trenches Roundtable. And today is a feature-focused episode where we're going to be covering and talking about utilizing different features within our components. And we have another awesome panel with us of experts to discuss this. So let me take some time to introduce each of the team. First, we have Michael Bell. He's our support manager.
Hello, everybody.
And next, we've got James Campbell. He's our product specialist and technology manager.
Hey, everybody.
And last, but certainly not least, we have Matthew Nederlanden. He is our chief executive officer.
Hi, everybody.
Awesome. So now that we're all on the same page, we're going to be discussing a topic that comes up often, especially when it comes to securing your assets and making sure your facility infrastructure is in a good place in terms of security, maintenance, preventative, keeping people out of things you don't want them in. So I want to start off by asking James and Michael here, can you talk us through and walk us through some examples of kind of what this problem is and why we see it so often?
Essentially, most facilities have some specific area, potentially equipment, some kind of scenario where there's a greater emphasis on alerts, specific recording requirements for that area. So, I know the example we've been looking at here recently has been AC units. They've had a lot of vandalism. I think, Michael, you may have had a customer that had something like that. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. We actually had one customer within a month period have 3 AC units taken from him. And goodness, I couldn't even imagine the cost that's associated with that. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that was the big reason that they reached out for us, is that those things happen, and that's why they needed to put in those security systems.
Exactly.
Is trying to prevent that in the future.
So Matt, you being a business owner yourself, you've probably experienced things just like this. This is something that you'd probably consider as you take on a new facility, right? As you look into purchasing a building?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have an asset outside, it's going to be riskier than an asset inside. And obviously, certain assets cannot come inside. You can't put an AC unit inside your building, but you still have to secure it. And so it can be difficult to make sure that no one is messing with that object. In the same way, there's a bunch of other assets that you may have that are outside. You may have a shed that has, equipment in it. You may have a work vehicle, etc. Anytime that you have something that is of value and you have to store it outside, your boat, whatever, it's a little bit harder to protect than when it's inside of a safe enclosed space with a lock on it. And that poses a bunch of challenges. And definitely things you have to think about before you purchase a property, or in the case of like you get an extra work vehicle, just purchasing that additional asset.
Gotcha. And more so for even than theft, I've heard some business owners, at least ones I've talked with, talk about liability issues come up with like loading docks and people skateboarding or loitering after the fact. And that's something to consider too, right? Like dumpster surveillance and illegal dumping and things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, everything from illegal dumping to vandalism, to theft or safety concerns. Take for example somebody with a landscaping business, for example. There's a great number of tools that they have that they don't bring inside, which could very easily hurt somebody if they don't know what they're doing. So you do have a lot of concerns that you have to make sure that your equipment is able to be traced. Where is it? If you have a lot of assets, you need to know where they are. Number two, you need to be able to make sure that the right people are using them. You obviously don't want to have a small child come in and start messing with your lawnmower. Something terrible could happen. For example. And in the same way, obviously, you've got to protect against people who might steal the copper from your pipes or vandalize your your building, or many other issues.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that's the problem. That's the problem. We understand expensive thefts or damage of building infrastructure, things like your HVAC, building materials, sheds, outbuildings, dumpsters, parking lot surveillance, things like that. Matt, or I mean, Michael and James, what are some ways that we can solve for this using some features?
Well, sorry, I hate to jump in, James, but number one, just cover the area with a camera. I mean,
Good
it's
point.
kind of nice to
Yeah.
be able to look back as to what happened, but that way you actually have the footage just in case insurance or the authorities need something to go off of. But that's being more reactive than proactive.
Mhm.
So by setting up something like an intrusion detection to where you can segregate a section of that area of a camera to say, okay, if something is in this area, I want to be notified. And that could also pertain to the size of an object or the time that an object is in that particular space. So there are ways that you can be proactive by getting, say, a push alert to your phone using a CW Go that says, hey, pay attention to me. Something is happening in this particular area that you set up.
Gotcha. And it starts obviously by first having a camera in that spot, right? So
Of
making
course.
sure those things are covered and then looking into some of the analytic features to actually get that set up and be proactive. That's smart.
Correct.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
think for security cameras, and actually for video surveillance cameras, because some people don't even like the term security cameras. I think most people assume, these are for evidence, they're for recording, but they're more advanced than that nowadays because of what they offer in terms of feature sets. We just talked about intrusion detection. That's a video analytic that you draw a box, you set an area, and you have some additional options for that, to be able to set how long somebody has to be in that zone, how large of a person they have to be in that zone. And, so that gives you an option to get far more important notifications than general motion, which we all know, everyone's probably had an experience where they got put general motion on and got 1,000 emails or 1,000 push notifications within a day. So
This
understanding
time of year,
those,
it's horrible with the snow falling. Everybody's
Yeah.
getting those alerts with motion and snow falling. It's crazy.
So what you're saying is that with something like an intrusion alert, what I can do is I can draw an area and say, as soon as somebody enters this area or something, give me a notice. And that notice could be pushed to my cell phone in the form of either a push alert or sent to an email.
Correct.
And I want to talk about a little bit of like where that works and where that doesn't work. It's a great technology, and we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive in it today. But there are obviously some places where it doesn't work. So sometimes they work where you have assets where you know that they're going to be. So let's take the idea of like an AC unit. It's a perfect example of a good use case of this sort of technology. I know where my AC is going to be. It's not going to move on me. On the flip side, as a business owner with a fleet of trucks with installation technicians, it's not always a great solution for somebody breaking into my vehicle, because it's very possible that the vehicle is not where it was supposed to be. These are the parking spots where the vehicles are supposed to go. Well, maybe a tech came back and some random person had parked there, and they didn't park there. They parked somewhere else. This can be a little bit of a challenge on it. So where does an intrusion detection alert work well? Well, it works well where I know that something is where it's supposed to be. So an AC unit is the perfect example. It's not going to move. A dumpster is a great example. It works the most of the time when you go set up, something like a detection alert or a parking lot that has, clearly demarked spaces. It doesn't always work so great though if I'm going to park in a random spot every time I come home. And that can prove some challenges. It's not always the thing you want to use. And there are conditions where it is the right tool, but it isn't necessarily always the right tool.
Right. And this intrusion detection, this is more advanced than your traditional motion, right? That most people are familiar with when they think of surveillance cameras and the type of alerts or notifications you can get. Am I right?
100%. Just to kind of go back to the gentleman that I talked to about his AC units and how many were stolen, within the month. He put up a camera to watch that area after the fact, unfortunately. But now he's surveying that area, but we also set up an intrusion detection for just the AC units themselves. So if something were to go into that area, the size of an average adult, he would be notified. So that way he's surveying the area. He is recording on motion, but he is also getting those triggers to his phone that says, hey, pay attention, something's happening.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That makes a ton of sense.
And I would also make the distinction that the difference between a motion alert, which can occur with, you've got settings on how much motion you want there, but an intrusion can have a bunch of different settings on that top of that as well, such as how long something is in there. So one of our challenges that we'll be talking about here is we have, sort of right on the outside of the building wall over here on the SCW campus, we have a walkway that people who, it's a multi-use building. We've got some renters. We've got several different corporate locations that are inside our building with us. We own the building. But we have people who will take that walkway that the camera can see. And we don't want to get an alert on that. Maybe it's a tenant leave. But we do want to get an alert if somebody stops and dwells and hangs out right where the AC unit is. So there's a big distinction between a motion alert of just, hey, something is happening versus an intrusion detection of the thing that is happening here has a greater amount of significance because somebody is dwelling here. So somebody walking past the AC unit would set off motion, but wouldn't necessarily set off an intrusion alert with a delay function on it, dwell function. Where somebody has to stay within that area for a certain amount of time. And this allows us to differentiate between somebody just walking on the pathway, who might be a renter leaving, and somebody that might be dismantling the AC unit in order to steal it.
I think it's important to go back a little bit. We've sort of brushed around talking about motion detection and what, how that's not how it actually doesn't work great in these scenarios sometimes. But it's important to know like how motion detection works with every camera, because every camera has a motion detection. So you might think, well, why can't I just use that? Motion detection works by looking at any pixel changes within the image. You can draw a box and set sensitivity to try to help that, but that's anything. So that means if a bug gets in front of the camera, that's going to be enough of a motion for it to trigger and to record or send you an alert if you got it set up. So the problem we generally find with that is, it's great for recording because it's still going to cut down, the amount of hard drive space, the amount of footage you sort of have to scrub through. But for alerts, where it really goes sour is when you've got that alert set up and you're really thinking anytime somebody's at my AC unit, I'm really worried about somebody stealing this. We've already had 3 of them, why can't I set this up? Well, because you're going to get a bunch of false positives throughout the course of a day. And eventually you're going to stop reading those notifications and they become noise. So intrusion detection allows us to, specify, like Matthew's saying, specify the area, specify the amount of time somebody has to be there and how big something has to be. So we're not also setting up to where a squirrel is potentially setting it off because it's in there either. So you have some customization and for that.
And just to put this out there, the time threshold on the intrusion detection is between 1 and 10 seconds. So you can set that to, if it takes somebody 3 seconds to walk down that pathway, it's not going to notify you. But you set it to 5 seconds, that means somebody's either taking their time or they stopped.
Gotcha. Nice. That's interesting. That's awesome. And what about other things like, I see sometimes in the movies and on TV shows, these like alerts or alarms that go off when certain things are detected. Is that the case for our cameras or camera systems in general? Is that something that you're able to utilize?
We do have a line of newer cameras that are they're called active deterrence cameras. And so we have a couple different models that can do something like that. So one of them that's really cool is the Lookout Mini active deterrence editions. So these actually have a strobe light on them. They flash red and blue, and they have a speaker built in, and they'll say a warning to you when they actually detect something like that. So intrusion detection, which can, not only just give you a notification for it as well, but also act as a deterrence for somebody who goes, okay, I'm going to steal some copper out of this AC unit. Then they go to it and they realize that, oh wait, somebody's there, somebody's watching me, I got to get out of here. So it's there to potentially scare somebody away from that challenge. So
And I believe that those have 10 different recorded sayings in those cameras.
yeah, anything from like parking warnings to danger zone and a bunch of things in between.
And restricted areas. So it could also be used for more than just a theft deterrent. It could be for safety as well, life safety.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
if there's dangerous areas or something like that, can kind of warn you away. So yeah, definitely multi-use for those. We've sought a lot of creative.
That's great. And that's built into some of the camera models.
Yep. So the Lookout Mini has active deterrence, as does the Warrior 8.0 V3 model and the Paladin 8.0 as well. And those act, they're all a little different as far as the ways they can trigger. For example, the Warrior and the Paladin doesn't have the strobe light. They have a white light that flashes. So you have a couple of options there for it, but certainly speak to us and we can recommend probably the best one for that scenario. But the Lookout is kind of the more obvious just because it's got that strobe and the white light triggers as well.
Definitely. So with the, you could possibly combine the two, right? With the use of some of these active deterrents, the intrusion detection, these are features that could maybe work together to help create almost an ideal solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think
I'll speak to that. So again, going back to our scenario here, and as both the property owner and the business owner, take for example, like if one of our tenants had an issue with another tenant, we want to be able to record any time that there's motion because we don't want to ever miss something. But at the same point, like if somebody's just walking past or talking to somebody else, I certainly don't want to have like a siren going off. I want to be able to limit that to the time periods where I'm absolutely sure that this is a problem. Even if tenants are having two disputes with each other, that's not really an appropriate time for a siren to go off. We may have to have the video to talk it over and figure out a resolution. But the ability to tell when that's a problem is not something we want a siren to solve. That's not a problem we want a siren to solve. On the flip side, though, like somebody dwelling next to the dumpster, who isn't supposed to be here during time periods that we're closed, or somebody that is dwelling and hanging out next to the AC unit, we do want to have a siren. We want to be very clear, like you're being recorded right now. And we want to make sure that me as the business owner, I get an alert for that. I don't want an alert when a tenant comes and goes. They come and go all hours. I certainly don't want to be woken up by somebody coming in because they couldn't sleep one night and decided to do some work. That happens pretty frequently around here. And I don't want to be woken up for that. That's not an emergency. And so something like motion is great for making sure that I never miss anything. And something like a dwell time timer around the AC unit, it's really great for a situation where I want to be woken up and where I want to have, if that camera supports it with the active deterrence, an alarm going off, a siren. I want an action to be taken. And it helps differentiate between the two different needs. I have a need to record everything that there's a human interaction here because I want to lessen my liability. On the same point, I definitely don't want to be woken up.
Right. So it sounds like we can do that on a per camera basis based on the need that camera is actually looking at.
Yes.
Awesome. Cool deal. And in that scenario, Matt, looking back to our mock scenario here at the SCW campus with these HVAC systems on the outside like that, and then some of the parking lot surveillance cameras, what would we recommend? What features and different active deterrents or features that we would recommend for this?
Yeah. So as a business owner to business owner, what I would say is you absolutely have a need to know what's happening in your property and be able to do an investigation. And so anytime that there's motion, you want to be absolutely sure that you've recorded that. And so you want to have your settings in order to record to be pretty loose because you don't want to miss things. At the same point, if you're getting an alert or you're taking, an action that is trying to scare somebody, you really don't want to do that where that is not the appropriate response. Imagine the chaos that would be created if in the middle of the workday, every time a employee was walking around packing a box in the warehouse, there's a siren going off. It would be pandemonium. And so we want to be able to restrict that to the appropriate time periods. At the same point, I absolutely have a need to record everything that's going on inside the warehouse because I need to make sure that my employees are protected from outside threats. I need to be able to make sure that they're protected from my own negligence. Did I correctly ice the, just snowed here, did I correctly ice the, de-ice the, the walkways? Or am I really confident that no employee is harassing another employee? I need to be able to record all of those events and make sure that if there is something that comes to my concern, I can review it. So it doesn't become a he said, she said sort of situation. But I definitely don't want to be alerted or woken up or have a siren under every one of those conditions.
Gotcha. No, that makes a ton of sense.
I think it's important just to kind of go on with what Matthew was saying there is, not every scenario is an active deterrence scenario. The ones that we're talking about here are active deterrence scenarios. It's extremely uncommon. I don't think we've ever had a scenario like this where we're quoting or installing, 16 cameras and all 16 of them are lookout minis or using active deterrence features on any of the other cameras. But the other distinction is also time-based. So the active deterrence features are triggered by the intrusion detection or even line crossing as well, although I don't think that for this scenario it's as applicable. But you can enable that analytic to be active during certain hours. So, if it is an area of, let's just say your office closes at 5 o'clock and nobody really should be there past 5 o'clock and everything's locked and nobody should be there, that might be something where you want to turn off intrusion detector during the day and then turn it on after 5 o'clock and then get those active deterrence features after hours, because you can have the active deterrence on and operating and then you can record however you want. So you can record constantly, you can record on motion, and then that is, they're not necessarily have to be linked together. So I think that's a key thing when we look at when we're building a system and we're getting these concerns from customers.
And just to kind of piggyback on that a little bit, if you're recording 24/7, you can still have motion triggers show up in your recorded footage. But if you're also using the view station application and you do have VCA options like intrusion detection enabled, you can have a color marker on your playback that says, hey, a VCA event happened at this time. So you can easily get to that point within your footage to be able to see exactly what happened, even if you didn't set up an alert to come through.
Oh, wow. Nice. So you could actually use some of these features to help just scrub footage, to make scrubbing footage easier.
100%.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. And as somebody who has had to review a substantial amount of footage before, often finding what you're looking for can be an incredibly difficult task if you don't have any of those features set up. So again, even if you want to record 24/7, just be able to tell these are the ones that had motion, these are the ones that had line crossing or intrusion detection, it's going to save you a massive amount of time.
Right.
Investigating an HR incident as a business owner will often take you entire days to be able to find the footage if you don't specifically know what you're looking for. And most HR incidences, you don't really know what you're looking for. And so, people's memories are not super great, and they're certainly not thinking, which camera was I in front of at exactly what time periods. So having these features being able to be set up where you can take that mountain of video 24/7 times the number of cameras that you've got there. So you've got 16 cameras and you know what occurred on a day. If you haven't set up any of these features, you got 16 days here. You got to look through everything if you don't know what you're looking for. Having these tools set up is going to save you substantial amounts of time be able to filter that down and say, I'm looking for, somebody that crossed into my warehouse after business hours, and have the line crossing feature for the doorway for your warehouse set up in advance. You're going to find it in minutes, instead of saying, well, I've got to analyze the entire weekend because somebody came in here because I've got stuff missing from my warehouse and I don't know when it is. So having these sort of features set up in advance is going to save you massive amounts of time when you go to find out what happened, when you walk into your business on a Monday morning and say, stuff's not here. What happened?
Cool. As a novice like myself, and as I can imagine most business owners are when it comes to configuration of camera systems and such, these features sound amazing, especially after the fact or even before the fact, but getting them set up sounds like a whole different story. How would we go about helping business owners and executive owners alike get these type of things set up? How do we support that?
Oh, that's me. That's me and my team. Best support in the world, by the way. Not to pat ourselves on the back, but yeah, support is always available to everybody. Monday through Friday Eastern time, 9 to 7. So give us a call. 866-414-2553 is our 800 number. You can get to sales and support from there, or 828-253-2242 is our direct line to support. But just to kind of put it out there, we do have guides on the website. We actually have an intrusion detection section on the website. If you go to the video content analytics page, it's all right there, how to set it up. There's visuals there. I believe that we have a video on the website. James, you might be able to tell me yes or no on that. I can't remember.
I think so, somewhere for setting this one up.
It's either there, maybe it's on our YouTube page as well. But support
Even
is
if we
always
don't have
available.
one there now, we will have one as part of this video.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, support. I mean, we are here for the customer anytime they need us. So just give us a call, send us a chat, send us an email. We'll walk you through whatever you need to get done.
Awesome.
And I think piggybacking on that too, one of the most important things about setting up these analytics, obviously in this scenario, you've got your AC set up in a way that is potentially being damaged and copper stolen and all that kind of stuff. It's very, very important to test these analytics. Test them at certain amounts of the day. So as you're tweaking these settings, that expect that, if you're an end user setting this up, that you're going to have to go out there and, wait to see and make sure you're getting the notifications correctly, and make sure that it's going to be working in different lighting and all kind of scenarios as well. So, do one at night to make sure that, you're still getting notifications at night, because that's more likely where potential something like that could happen. So testing, I think is a very key part of making sure your analytics are work. Don't just set it up and then go, oh, I hope it works when it happens. You definitely want to make sure that you've done some due diligence there and make sure testing is part of that setup process.
100%. And I know some customers who they kind of get it like a silver bullet the first time. And there's others who honestly, it'll take them 2 weeks before they're finally comfortable with the alerts that they're getting, and we'll talk to them over and over again, just making little tweaks here and there. And of course, them working on it on their own before they are truly comfortable with it. And I hate to say it, but sometimes that feature just may not work for that particular instance for that customer. So we look at other options, that might be available to them depending on their camera and what other, hardware they might have.
And that brings up
this is a tool chest.
Yes.
And it's not always the right tool. But the big thing that I would want to point out is that, with everything else that we have on the website and our entire strategy about communication, we try and support dual paths. Maybe you're the type of person who loves to dig into technical manuals and be able to set everything up exactly the way you want it to, and you value your privacy and you don't want anybody to look at it. That's fine. You should be able to get every piece of information about how to do that on our website. That's our goal for that. At the same point, maybe you got too many things on your plate and you're not super technical and you don't want to be. And we are very happy to do it for you. We're very happy to set it up. We're very happy to check back in it later, just like James is saying, of making sure that we created a criteria. Now we need to evaluate that criteria. We are very happy to do as much or as little of the work on this for you, because management of these sort of things can be it can be difficult. And so we want to make sure that we're there for those customers who want a more of inclusive service.
And it's great to know that, our support team will be there to help after the testing and retesting configuration phase. That's just so crucial. And as Michael alluded, that's why we have so many 5-star reviews all over our websites and review.
That's what we like to do.
Shout
it's
out
fun.
to that team.
It's
Definitely.
fun to help people.
That's right. Definitely, especially solve these scenarios like this, because as Matt can allude to, critical infrastructure losses like this can be mission critical, and the impact can be, far outside of that initial thing, right? If an HVAC gets stolen, it's not just the HVAC that gets stolen; it's everything else that snowballs. So
Yeah, all of a
mean,
sudden your
extremely
building doesn't have heat or cool in
Exactly.
the summer, and nobody's going in, and you're having to close down. And I mean, there's more than just losing that, for sure.
Yeah, one of the things that I constantly, when I get to talk to customers, one of the things that I constantly talk about is the unknown risk, and that's big. The biggest thing that it really the cost of, let's say, your AC unit, maybe it's $3,000, whatever you pay for it, commercial AC. It's not really a big problem, not from the standpoint of a business. The big problem is that none of your people could show up to work today because the working conditions weren't there. So you've lost an entire day's of revenue. So you might have lost, $10,000 today on top of that $3,000. And the other big issue for a business owner is the way this changes your liability, your insurance rates. So not only do you lose $3,000, but you're going to pay 3 times that over the next 9 years, in increasing your costs for the insurance claims. And so there's a level of complexity that for a business owner that is a much deeper for a lot of these problems, not just the loss of the AC unit, it's the loss of all of the revenue that you would have created, let's say if you're a retailer, during the entire period where you're waiting to go get a new one. That will be substantially greater than the simple $3,000. Depending, obviously depending on your type of business and what you serve, et cetera. But for a lot of businesses, the major difficulty is not the loss of the thing that they are having to replace, but the loss of the productivity from not having that thing. Let me give you another example of the sort of thing that sometimes I think non-business owners don't think about. Let's say somebody comes over and steals my dumpster. It doesn't cost me anything. It literally cost me $0. I don't own that dumpster. I sort of lease it when I get the contract for the company to come in and take it away. It literally takes me $0. But imagine the pandemonium inside the warehouse if we couldn't throw anything away for 24 hours. What do we do with all that cardboard? All the packaging materials and et cetera. And so this is a sort of problem that a business has that an individual may not have. That can really compound costs. It's literally a $0 theft for me as the business owner. It's somebody else's property that's gone, but it creates a massive multi-layered disruption that could stop all of the production in the warehouse for a time. We may not be able to receive shipments in. We may not be able to dispose of things. We may have people unable to do their job because trash is piling up. And this is literally stemming from a $0 problem. And these sort of things can have big ramifications that may not be as clearly seen from the onset.
Yeah, I mean, that even goes into like leasing too.
Mhm.
Like if you're a lease, somebody who's in a lease, you don't own anything on the building, or, you may not be responsible for any of that. But, if you're a restaurant who's leasing a building and that AC unit goes out and, the next day it's 85 degrees, 90 degrees and outside, and, inside they can't cook because it's so hot, and people don't want to stay in the restaurant because it's so hot because the AC unit's broken, then you're kind of down a creek. So
Right, you're sending people home either with and potentially, having some major losses with pay,
yeah,
or sending people home without pay and potentially losing your employees because who wants to work for a company that is unstable like that?
yeah,
It can have massive ramifications that are well beyond just the dollar value of the thing that was taken. I do this within new employee training every time they come on, where we talk about the risks that business take and starting to understand what those risks are. And we use a couple of examples. Like almost every time a mechanic shop comes to us, they come to us with a problem. They said, hey, I need to get cameras because somebody keeps coming in and stealing something from my cash register. So somebody's coming with a knife or a gun and they're, give me all the money. And that's why I need cameras. But that's not really a big risk for an org, especially with how many people pay by credit cards these days. What are they going to steal? 2-3% of your revenue? How many clients are cash clients these days? Not a lot. But the big risk actually for a mechanic shop is that somebody might come in and steal the tools. If somebody steals your tools, no one is doing any work. There's zero productivity. You have no revenue coming in until you replace all the tools. And some of those tools, like let's say, a lift, that's a specialty tool that takes a long time to go get. It's got a manufacturer timeline usually attached to it. It's not like a screwdriver. And that could be $400,000 or $500,000 of miscellaneous sort of tools that a mechanic shop has. That's a way different theft than somebody stole $75 or $200 from a cash register. And a lot of times people, they experience the hassle of having to do the insurance claim and all of the stuff related to, the theft of the, of the cash register, but they've got this really giant risk that might actually make their business non-functional and make it go bankrupt. And so a lot of businesses have that across the board. So again, going back to just the theft of, an AC unit, if you own a restaurant and, let's say you're in Florida or Arizona or someplace where it's pretty hot, and you have a theft of your AC unit, how long is it going to be before you replace it? And how much revenue are you going to make in between then? Because who wants to come in and start cooking in 120-degree heat? And what customer says, hey, yeah, I want to come dine in your establishment because you've got no air conditioning. And how much of that is going to drastically disrupt your business? It's not the $3,000 that could be lost that's the problem as the business owner. It's the loss of productivity and losing the ability to make money for a few days can drastically change whether or not you're profitable at the end of the month. Most businesses are, less than 10% profitable at the end of the day. So if you've got 10% of your month that you're unexpectedly closed, you can suddenly be very deep into the red.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's just one example, right? I think dumpsters is another great example. It's a product, a piece of infrastructure that you probably don't necessarily own as a business owner, but can vitally impact your day-to-day operations and your profitability at the end of the month if it goes missing or if it's full all of a sudden when it's not supposed to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, great. James had a wonderful, discussion a second ago about that as a company that may not even own their infrastructure. So maybe you're renting your restaurant space. It's not even your space.
Mhm.
So it's not even your liability if somebody comes in and breaks all the windows. But is anybody going to dine there?
Right.
Yeah.
It's true. So true. And it's incredible. We've also only been talking about features, analytics, things that are built into the camera systems. And camera systems are just one component of a multitude of physical security components that we could use or utilize to solve issues like this. Did you really want to talk about and walk through some of the other options on the market for securing this type of infrastructure?
Yeah, so I mean, if we go back to our example of the AC units, there are other options there too. I think video surveillance or security cameras, whatever you like to call them, play one key role. Nowadays, we've got the video recording aspect, of course, but also some active deterrence and notification features as well. But there are other options. For example, on an AC, there are cages you can put on an AC unit that help prevent somebody from going in there. Now, a lot of times, that's just time. So somebody who has a hacksaw already is going to potentially be able to hacksaw through those, especially on, those start at about $200 or $300 at Lowe's, so the more expensive ones, more reinforcement, better materials are going to cost 3 or 4 times that. So, but having a multi-layered approach to security, I think, is always the best idea. You can have, throw a cage on there. It might buy you only 10 minutes, but that 10 minutes may be enough for the police to actually apprehend somebody and get to your business. Whereas if you don't have it, you'll get a notification, but how soon can you act on it? So multi-layer security, using some physical security if you can, preventing access to an area if you can. Not always possible, but if you can do it, it definitely can help.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes an outdoor asset more difficult to secure, is that you can't have as many layers. If you're trying to protect the assets that are directly behind me, that are inside the building, you're going to have a sturdy door with a good lock. You're going to have an alarm system that alerts you when you're closed, that somebody is unauthorized is here. You're going to have, assuming that you're a big enough business where this makes sense, you're going to have smart access, so it's not just a physical key that anybody could copy, but it's an access that you can control, and you can limit hours so people can come and go, through an access control system. But the problem with a outdoor asset is that most of those things are not as available. And so that's one of the biggest challenges. Really, one of the only layers of security that you can have, is the cameras. And so that's why this sort of feature matters more, is because you don't have as many layers. No single security product is going to fix every problem that you have, or every possible problem that you could have. You want to layer your security on top of each other, so that the person who is inside mid-building right now is allowed to be here. They've passed their identity check with the access control. They have the proper code on the alarm system. So they have something that they are, something they possess, something that they know. And then you want to be able to have the evidence collection tool with the cameras to make sure that, somebody didn't steal your phone with the access key and, put you at gunpoint and say, tell me the code. And you want to have all of those things on top of each other. And each one of those things is going to, solve a specific problem and reduce your threat risk overall. But it's important that you have all of them, because there's no singular tool that can guarantee that you don't have one of those risks just by itself.
Exactly, right. And I think what we've been covering today has been the lowest cost to solution benefit, right? Surveillance systems is something that you're going to inherently have in your business, and these analytics and features built into those cameras create, they come with that cost. It's nothing but time at that point to help get it set up, but it solves for some of that solution. Things like perimeter fences or fancy perimeter intrusion detection systems, it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per foot, and some businesses just can't simply afford that. So utilizing what we have available to us to the best of our ability, I think is key here, and why we spent most of our time talking about surveillance solutions. Right.
I like that question about budget too, Ben, there, because that's like, when you talk about you should have all of this, like, budgets are a thing for everybody. So when you're looking at video surveillance, a lot of times that ends up being the most cost effective, because, the physical infrastructure you have to build in there is simply the camera and, cat cable to get back to an NVR or however you're kind of running it is pretty low in comparison to potentially having to set up, alarm situation with that. You have to get an alarm technician out there. So, when it comes down to budget and figuring out, what are you giving up by not having that, and what do you just, as long as you have that expectation of, hey, I know I'm not getting this. I think it ends up, you'll end up being happier with your system and your scenario.
So I'm gonna disagree with you there, and say the best security dollar for your buck isn't even the thing that we sell. It's a good door with a good lock, a sturdy door. That's the best bang that you're ever going to get for your security dollar. If you haven't done that, don't do anything else. If that's the only thing you can afford, that's the best thing that you can afford, is keep the bad people out of the spaces where you don't want them. From there, I would absolutely agree with you, though. The next step is make sure that you've got cameras, because if you don't have a recording of it, you don't really have anything, not in this day and age. You need to be able to prove what happened if something happened. And I would do cameras before, any sort of alarm system or access control system. And then from there, access control and alarms are absolutely imperative, depending on your size of your business and whether or not it's a business or a home. Being able to know and control, as you start getting into a larger employer that has a bunch of different people, you don't want to give them all keys. who knows when they're coming and going? Who knows how many times they're copying it? Do you really want to have to go through the hassle of changing the locks every time an employee quits or leaves for a better opportunity or gets fired? That's a lot of work, and at $1,000 a pop to be able to rekey your building, that's a huge expense. Access control is way less than that. But on the flip side, if you only got 2 or 3 employees, that's not actually a huge expense. It is a function of how many people you have on the value you get from something like access control. And so, a giant company, I might even say access control should be before a camera system in terms of the value you get out of it. But it is a function of the number of people that you have. But your best spent dollar, whether you're a homeowner or a business, is make sure you have a good door.
Definitely, and especially when we come to talking about securing the assets with inside of the building or the home's perimeter. But if we're talking about exterior things like HVAC systems, building materials that are left outside, outbuildings, things of that nature, a lot of people's first thoughts probably go to fencing, right?
Get a
Perimeter
big hungry
fencing.
dog.
Exactly. Security dogs, it's a thing, absolutely a thing. There's a market for it, but again, it's going to come down to the dollars that you can spend given the size of your facility, size of your building. Do you own it? Do you not own it? These type of things. And again, I think surveillance can be a go-to to utilize multiple different facets, just because it's something that you're probably going to inherently do anyway.
You're absolutely right. For an outdoor asset, your best security dollar is a camera system. Take our property here. You have an entry point from almost every direction. We have basically a road that goes right in the middle of us. That's between the 2 buildings, and that you can enter on either side of the property. It's almost an impossible scenario to really accurately protect that with a fence.
Exactly.
A camera is really your only solution for this and many other properties.
And speaking to our property specifically too, some of the entryways are just impossible to try to get a physical locking gate system in, right? If we want to talk about locking down the actual parking lot or driveways, so there are going to be scenarios with other facilities and other parking lots that are the exact same way. The physical sloping of the property just doesn't allow for that type of security asset.
The slope of the hill here is pretty problematic. But even if you don't have a slope of a hill, a child can jump over a fence. Middle schoolers jump over fences
Seriously.
all the time. Fences are a deterrent, and they can be a useful tool in trying to deter, but they're never going to stop anybody who's truly dedicated.
Exactly. That goes back to James' point with the hacksaw.
Yeah, we've dealt with that. I was just about to say, I remember multiple calls I've been with you on Ben where they have fencing, but somebody's ripped a hole through it and they fix it, and then a couple of days later there's another hole somewhere else on the fence. And I think there's a saying that's don't let perfect become the enemy of good. And I think when you're dealing with doing a small thing, like for example, those air conditioning cages I was talking about, the cheap ones are $200 or $300. They're not necessarily cheap, but what they do offer you is time, and they're better than having nothing potentially at all in that scenario. So, it may not be the best one, and it's not going to be it's not going to be a silver bullet. It's not going to be something that immediately fixes all your issues, but combined with the camera, getting a good notification, you can act on that and buy yourself time and hopefully prevent this scenario potentially.
As we speak to other solutions or things that we can implement there are some alarm systems that have perimeter intrusion for exteriors. Is that right?
Yeah, so you could do potentially a PIR or passive infrared sensor there. That's a motion sensor, kind of similar to what you get with your motion lights around a building or around a home. And they have a little bit more advanced options as far as the field of view it has and range and all that kind of stuff, so you can tweak it. But it is something that does take some expertise to set up. I think you would need to potentially get an alarm tech out there to position it correctly, because that's the number one thing there. You really have to to get the positioning right. And then number two, tweak anything else as far as the range, lens options on them in order to make sure that you're getting the right alerts. Because if you do have an alarm system and that's going and that's dispatching police, if nobody's there and it happens to be, John was walking by and had a phone call and he was in front of the alarm or the alarm too long, and that's going to potentially get you a fine. So enough false alerts from an alarm system will get you fined, and that's going to become an additional cost. So it's an option, definitely one that you can consider, but just keep in mind it's not as easy, it's not as remotely supportable as a video surveillance system.
Yeah, I'll speak to that as well. First off, the fines can be kind of ridiculous. It does depend on your jurisdiction. So depending on where you live, this number may not be accurate. But here, if you have too many false alerts, it's a $500 fine per instance. And
Wow.
that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So something like, that PIR sensor that James was talking about, it's a bit like a virtual tripwire. You walk over it, makes an alert. The problem is there's also this other stuff that can go over it too and also create an alert. A dog, a cat, tumbleweed. You could have all sorts of stuff that sets that off that you don't really want it to set that off. And at $500 every time you're wrong, because it goes to an alarm monitoring company who sends, a fire truck or a police vehicle, that can get a little bit expensive. The fact that it's kind of filtering through a human being first with the video component, see what's happening before you decide to call, that's going to save you a lot of money. Because, the other thing that you should do is, I don't really love this as a use case, this tripwire function for something with as many entrance points as a outdoor AC unit. So outdoor AC unit, you've got somebody that can come this way, somebody that way, somebody here. You got to have at least 3 of those. And that's, $150 for each one of them. That starts to get, in the $500 range just to buy the equipment. And you can certainly get a better camera at that sort of price point. I do like that product for different use cases. So let's say you've got a big porch, sort of southern plantation home with a giant porch with a, a singular walkway. That's a great point. You've got sort of a threshold that somebody has to come over. You probably have stuff on your porch that matters to you. They're probably entering through the walkway, and you can hide the sensors behind usually the posts that are, on that sort of entranceway. That's a good use case. On the flip side, something that, somebody might be coming from any direction, you're having to buy a lot of those products, and they're very visible, and they're kind of easy to go around if they're visible. This is unlike a camera where the fact that you can see it kind of helps, because what can you really do about it? It's too high for me to do anything. And by the time that I could do anything, I'm already being captured by it. So this is different than a tripwire where you can walk right up to it and then just step over it.
And I do believe as well, I've seen these and had this exact scenario, actually. Somebody had their AC being damaged and vandalized. And they do actually make products that are alarm products that you install within the AC unit. And there's a bunch of different options. It's like
an
basically
asset
a wire.
tag.
Yeah, it's a wire that goes through it. And that will actually go back to an alarm panel. And that way, it knows that something's tampering right now with the alarm system. With the AC, let's go back to the alarm. And that's a much better probably solution than just putting a PIR sensor there. But it's going to be a much more costly solution, because now you're talking, this is kind of a specialty product that they're not doing a bunch of volume on this. So it's going to be expensive for that product itself. And then the installation of it requires some pretty specific knowledge potentially about your HVAC units, which one's compatible with which, and all this kind of stuff. So you're going to end up paying for something like that. But it is, that if you're talking about alarms, that's probably the better route to go than potentially just the PIR. But that's definitely an alarm technician's role there. They're going to have to go to that site and figure out what actually works best. And if you have multiple HVAC units, that's the other thing to consider too. One camera could potentially cover multiple ones if they're close enough. Whereas you're
We've
going
got
to need an
3 of
alarm
them being
for,
covered by one camera right out here.
yeah. Whereas if
Exactly.
you need alarms, you're going to have one device for each and every one of those. So.
I would also like to mention something that we do know about crime, which is that when you get robbed of something that is valuable, like let's say an AC unit, and you replace it, the odds that you get robbed again for that exact same thing just skyrocketed. 700-800 times the baseline percentages of theft, because somebody's realized I could safely take this, and they just replaced it, and I got away with it the first time. Then they tend to do it again. And this is why some of these more advanced solutions, like what James is talking about, of getting an alarm technician out there and doing a pretty custom piece of work to make sure that this doesn't happen again, exist, and why they can become cost effective. So if you're the sort of person that is having this happen repeatedly, that calculus on whether or not it's worth it can change, because thieves like to return to places where they were successful.
Yeah, definitely. Just to wrap that all up, exactly. It's layering in what you can afford for the different size company you have, building you own or lease, and how that works for you. So definitely hope you found a lot of the things that we discussed today useful. I really appreciate Matt, Michael, James, all your input here. This is great. All the links to all the description, all the links to the documents and resources that we covered and talked about will be in that description below. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, Michael provided some of that support information, feedback. We're excited to have more discussion on this later, and we always welcome you reaching out to us and getting our feedback or input on things. So thanks so much for tuning in today. Really appreciate your time, and see you next time.